Ladies and gentlemen, it's Hot Legs, straight from the Wine Exchange, with wine expert Kyle Meyer.
Is it me, or is it starting to get a little cold outside? Now, granted, we're talking Southern California cold. I mean, here, temperature dips down below 50 degrees. We're already throwing on the parkas, thinking about stews. And when we think about stews and parkas and Siberian winters and snow, wait, it doesn't snow here, we start thinking Chateauneuf-du-Pape, because we love Chateauneuf-du-Pape. France's highest octane superstar red in our minds had a tremendous vintage in 2005. So today, since it's getting a little chillier out there, we're going to take a look at three of what I think are the best bang for the buck Chateauneufs from this historic vintage. Now, Chateauneuf, we've been selling the wines for 25 years. Back in the old days, Chateauneuf was kind of a really inexpensive wine. You could get good Chateauneuf for $12, $13. That's changed. A lot of things have changed. We're all older now. And now if you get a good bottle of Chateauneuf on the shelf for less than $30, you're getting that's about as good as it gets, especially with the Euro's at like 145 right now. Unbelievable. So we're going to feature three wines from a great vintage in Chateauneuf from three of our favorite producers from this fantastic vintage. We're going to start with the Chateau Forcha 2005 Chateauneuf-du-Pape. We're kind of going oldest to youngest based on the potential historic nature of the wineries. I don't know why I set it up that just wine geek thing, but I want to talk about Forcha first because the minds behind Forcha were one of the main instigators of creating the whole appellation contrôlée scenario in France, i.e., they created the guidelines for quality. And the Baron Leroy, who was the owner of Chateau Forcha, was one of the main folks behind establishing a whole quality control thing for not just Chateauneuf, but for all of France's wines. He's a revered man in France. There's like statues of him and everything. Anyway, this is a great historic estate, a castle from the 1800s, yada, yada, yada. And nowadays, they focus on making fantastic, traditionally styled Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Now, when I say traditionally styled, that means, as with the next wine, they age it in the larger French casks, which, the big ones, taller than you can fit, 20 people in them. That's what this wine ages in, because they do not want the terroir, or the sense of place, to be fettered by the use of small French oak barrels, which we kind of dig the traditional style. We're down with the big casks. The traditional blend in Chateauneuf is usually about 2/3 to 3/4 Grenache, with the balance being usually mostly Syrah and Mourvèdre. As is this wine. This is basically about 65-75% Grenache with the balance Syrah and Mourvèdre, and maybe a touch of Cunoise. All old vines. There's not too many young vines in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. I don't know if you've seen pictures, but lots of stubbly, old, gnarly, head-trained vineyards. And they just, there's a couple grapes on each one. Really low yields. Very hot there. And it makes for, to me, the most hedonistic wines that France can produce. The 05 vintage we love. It's the latest in a string of fantastic vintages, starting with 98 and continuing through to the 05, except for 02, which there were massive rains and it was a huge stinker and people were swept away and vineyards were underwater. But we forget about the bad times. Fresh Grenache, cran raspberry, ocean spray. I love the fruit in these wines because these wines are rich and have a fatness to them, but the fruit has a really tangy aspect to it, and there's wonderful spice box notes. The cinnamon and Christmas. They kind of smell and taste like the holidays. The current reign at Baron Leroy at Chateau Forcha is doing fantastic work. The Baron Leroy would be proud. We love this wine. The press sometimes doesn't get it because maybe it's not oaky enough or not modern enough, but fact of the matter, we think this is textbook Chateauneuf, and the Forcha does have a great track record of aging. You can put this in the cellar a long time, and it'll do wonders for you. It's on our shelf around $30, so killer wine. Next, we're going to go to Domaine Pierre Useglio. Now, Pierre Useglio is a slightly more modern estate than Chateau Forcha. The Francis Useglio came from Italy to Chateauneuf. Lord knows why. I mean, Italy's a nice place. Why go to southeastern France? Nothing there. It's hot. It's windy. But he did. And he proceeded to work as a wine grower for other people for about 16, 17 years until he founded his own estate in 1948. From there, he had two sons, Pierre and Raymond. Raymond kind of went his own way, and Pierre got the domain. Now, Pierre's sons, Jean-Pierre and Thierry, run the domain, and they have turned it into arguably the finest domain in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. There's a lot of great ones. There's over 320 individual growers in Chateauneuf, but these guys are right at the top 1%. Half the vineyard is those original plantings from the 1940s. So we're talking half the vineyard is 60-year-old vines. The other half runs around 30-year-old vines. And this is what they call, what we call in the business kind of like their traditional bottling, their classique, their normal. They make several different luxury cuvées on top of this, but their entry-level wine is really killer. Like the Fourchette, it's aged in the larger casks, but maybe a slightly different terroir. The Fourchette has a little broader feel on the palate. The Grenache is maybe a touch sappier, and from the Useglio wine, you get a hint more minerality out of the wine. You get a little more of that stony feel to it. All old vines. What a great year. Very silky, creamy. You can drink this straight away. And one of the knocks on the vintage from a couple of the pundits was that these wines are kind of tannic and backwards and brooding. I don't think so. I think these wines are perfectly balanced and have just this delicious cran raspberry, the fruit component. And when you add the minerality and the spice notes on top of that, you get hedonism and complexity. And I'm okay with that. Isn't that what you want in wine? Terrific wine, probably the best straight bottling that Useglio's made that I remember tasting, but that's only going back to like mid-90s. Terrific wine. That was going to stick with me. All right, Domaine Grand Veneur. Now we're kind of going to the youngest of our three domains here today, and Grand Veneur isn't. It was started by Alain Jaume in the late 70s, 1979 to be exact. But his ancestors were growers in Chateauneuf for an extended period of time before that. But he kind of also wanted to do his own thing, so he established Grand Veneur in the late 70s. And since then, he's purchased other estates, he's bought other vineyards, that sort of thing. But this is the heart of Alain Jaume's Southern Rhone empire, as it were. Alain is a very conscientious grower, very conscientious winemaker. He has vineyards up to 90 years old. He makes only one cuvée above this called Origine, so a lot of great old vine material finds its way into the straight Grand Veneur Chateauneuf. And he owns a lot of land, so the beauty of it is he makes quite a bit of this stuff, which we really love. You know, we always talk about how easy it is, you know, to make 100 cases of great wine. Well, try doing it, 20 times that, 30 times that. The more great wine you make, the tougher it gets. 70% Grenache here, 20% Syrah, and 10% Mourvèdre. He might use a little smaller cask, a pinch, but this is also done usually in the larger casks. But for some reason, this wine tends to have a more modern vibe to it, which is just fine by me. And here you get a little more black cherry. There's more depth and darkness to the fruit. Maybe a little less minerality than the Useglio wine, but a little less of that sappy, kirshy character to the cherry fruit and more of a dark cherry character, and a little less of the raspberry. Very fresh, very fruity, very palate-filling. Expansive on the palate. The wine grows from front to back. I mean, all these wines do, but I tend to see it a little more in the Grand Veneur wine. Like I said, maybe a touch less complex than the Useglio wine, but just layers of fruit and juicy, yummy yummies. I mean, just you're smacking your lips after you drink it. It's that type of wine. You can really get in trouble with a wine like this. All of them. Now, as I stated earlier, Chateauneuf has gotten a little pricier, but still, when you think about it on the worldwide scene of fine wines, these wines at around $30 a bottle can age 10 years. You can drink them now. You can drink them later. They're fantastic with an assortment of foods. Let me put it to you this way. We get a lot of folks trying to sell us wine back. A lot of folks that have great Burgundy cellars, great Bordeaux cellars, great California Cabernet cellars. What we don't see is we don't see the Chateauneuf. Because you know what? Everybody drinks their friggin' Chateauneuf. And that's a little mantra to live by. Everybody drinks their friggin' Chateauneuf. Cheers.